billionaires shouldn't exist. Why? Because hoarding obscene wealth while millions suffer isn't just unethical, it's unchristian. So, let's spend some time digging into that. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Afterthoughts. Today, we'll be diving into a topic that's bound to ruffle a few feathers. And that is my belief that billionaires shouldn't be allowed to exist. Yeah, I said it. I'm certainly not the first person to float that idea, but it's still a fairly bold statement, right? Especially in this country, where we idolize, or at least obsess over, anyone with obscene amounts of wealth. But stick with me, because we're going to unpack why I think it's absolutely true, and why it's not about envy or jealousy, and it's certainly not about punishing someone for hard work. It's about justice, fairness, and the collective good. Now, let's be real. I just recently spent an entire episode talking about values that matter, values that are worth passing on. But what happens when the values our society actually rewards are things like greed instead of generosity, or hoarding instead of sharing? Because that's what's happening when a handful of people are living it up on super yachts and throwing $50 million parties while millions of others are barely scraping by. As I go about making my case in this episode, I'd like you to keep this question in mind. What does it say about our society when a few people hoard more wealth than they could ever possibly spend, while millions of other hardworking people are trying to figure out if they'll be able to afford groceries and gas this month? I think it's something we need to start seriously discussing, because this is about more than just money. It's about what kind of world we want to live in and what kind of values we're passing on to the next generation. In fact, if we keep celebrating billionaires as admirable, self-made success stories, we're sending exactly the wrong message. All right, let's get real. Billionaire wealth isn't just some abstract number sitting in a bank account. It's concentrated power that's been siphoned away from everyone else. When a tiny fraction of people hoard more wealth than they would need to live extremely well for several thousand lifetimes, it doesn't just warp the economy. It corrodes the very foundation of our society. It's a whole lot like Rome before the fall, with emperors and oligarchs feasting while everyone else starved. We all know how that turned out. And don't just take my word for it. This podcast is called Mythologizing the Bible. Not because I'm trying to debunk the Christian Bible, but because I try to look for the excellent humanistic lessons that can be found. Sometimes I have to really dig around to find those good lessons, but the Bible doesn't really mince words about this topic. In James chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, it says, "Come now, you rich, weep and wail over your impending miseries. Your wealth has rotted away. Your clothes have become moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and that corrosion will be a testimony against you. It will devour your flesh like a fire. You have stored up treasures for the last days. Behold, the wages you withheld from the workers who harvested your fields are crying aloud, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and pleasure. You have fattened your hearts for the day of slaughter." Whoa. Translation? If you're sitting on a mountain of wealth while the people around you are suffering, you're not living a blessed life. You're living a cursed one. The Bible is clear. Hoarding wealth is to be condemned, not celebrated. If you believe the supernatural claims of the Bible, which most Christians do, then you damn well better believe that billionaires are going to burn in hell. Yet here we are, treating billionaires like they're modern-day saints because they throw a few million at charity while investing in the companies that pay their workers so poorly that those charities can never fill the gap. You know, instead of arguing about the redistribution of wealth, which is something conservatives hold up as some sort of ultimate evil, what if all of the wealth was more fairly distributed in the first place? Isn't that what the Bible is talking about? Behold, the wages you withheld from the workers who harvested your fields are crying aloud. But let's talk about taxes anyway, which is the main way our government tries to redistribute some of society's wealth. You know, that thing the rest of us pay every year like clockwork. Meanwhile, billionaires pay accountants to find every loophole in the book that they helped write, so they can pay a lower tax rate than the person who delivers their Amazon packages. Luke chapter 22, verse 33 says, "Sell your possessions and give to the poor." But billionaires? They're too busy buying yachts the size of football fields and tax avoiding through the loopholes that they paid politicians to create for them. Now, imagine for a second what we could do if they actually paid their fair share. We're talking universal health care, fully funded schools, affordable housing for everyone. And that's not some socialist pipe dream. That's basic human decency. But that can't happen as long as a handful of people are allowed to hoard obscene amounts of wealth while the rest of us are stuck picking up the tab. Now, let me be clear. This is not about envy, because I do not envy the people who are screwing this world into oblivion. This is about justice. It's about wanting to build a society that works for everyone, not just the richest 0.1%. You know what really grinds my gears? The whole self-made billionaire fairy tale. We're supposed to believe that billionaires clawed their way up from nothing through grit and determination. Yeah, except most of them didn't start from nothing. They started from Daddy's trust fund, Ivy League connections, or a Rolodex pact with venture capitalists who were more than happy to hand them millions in seed money. The system is rigged to favor those who already have money and connections. It's like running a marathon where the billionaires start at mile 24 and the rest of us are back at the starting line. And then they turn around and say, "Hey, look how far I ran in record time." Right, sure. Tell that to the people working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Then there's billionaire philanthropy. It's the big shiny distraction that's supposed to make us forget how these people hoarded obscene amounts of wealth in the first place. They throw a few million at a charity, slap their name on a building, and we're all supposed to stand up and applaud. But let's be honest. If they really wanted to help, they would more equitably distribute profits in the first place. And then just pay the taxes on what they do earn. Just like the rest of us. Boy, I sure wish Jesus had something to say about that kind of performative generosity. Oh, wait. Oh, he did, didn't he? In Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, Jesus said, "Take care not to perform righteous deeds in order that people may see them. Otherwise, you will have no recompense from your heavenly Father. When you give alms, do not blow a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, to win the praise of others. Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward." In other words, if you're going to be generous, do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you want a tax break or a feature story in Forbes. True generosity doesn't come with a press release. It doesn't come with a vanity foundation that lets you keep your billions while throwing crumbs to the masses. Real generosity means giving up some of your power, some of your comfort, and giving up a lot of your hoarded wealth. Not so you can look good, but so everyone else can actually live a decent life. Let's look at another famous story from the Bible, shall we? Remember the Pharaoh in Exodus? You know, the guy who hoarded wealth and power, exploited workers, slaves, and built massive monuments to himself. Does it sound familiar? Yeah, because today's billionaires are playing the same game. Except instead of building pyramids, they're building mega yachts, social media empires, and rocket ships. And who's doing all the heavy lifting? The workers. The tens of millions of workers who are scraping by on poverty wages while billionaires hoard more money than they could ever need. And this isn't just about not paying their fair and share in taxes, right? Though that they certainly aren't doing that either. No, this is about a system that's rigged to funnel wealth to those who already have it while keeping the rest of us fighting for crumbs. That's the core problem with our version of capitalism. It's designed to favor the wealthy, right? The ones holding the capital. That's why it's called capitalism. And as long as they keep hoarding, the rest of us keep struggling. It's exploitation decked out in a $10,000 designer suit, or black jeans, a stupid t-shirt, and a dark MAGA hat. Jesus had some strong words for folks like that too. In Luke chapter 18, verse 22, he told a wealthy man, "Sell all that you have and distribute it to the poor, and you will have a treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." Why did he say that? Because wealth corrupts. It distracts. It convinces people that they're entitled to hoard while others suffer. And yet, somehow, every wealthy preacher and billionaire Christian in America manages to twist that message to mean, keep it all for yourself and God will bless you more. I think the author of Luke's gospel anticipated that response, because the very next verse, chapter 18, verse 23, says of the wealthy man, "But when he heard this, he became quite sad, for he was very rich." You might be thinking, it's easy for you to criticize billionaires, but I don't see you selling everything and giving it all to the poor. No, you're right. But then again, Jesus wasn't going after the middle class, was he? Why do you think that was? Maybe because having a moderate amount of wealth, whether it's money, belongings, or house, that's never been a problem. Throughout history, the problem has always been the hoarding of extreme amounts of wealth. And let's be clear, accumulating that amount of wealth is hoarding, plain and simple. I mean, think about it. If Jesus walked into a billionaire's mansion today, would he be impressed by their 10-car garage or their private jet? Or would he call them out for the way they've hoarded wealth while entire communities go hungry? Would he praise their hard work and impressive innovations? Or would he flip over some fucking tables and demand they start sharing? Of course, those are purely rhetorical questions, because not even Jesus could make it past their security guards. They'd have him hauled away for trespassing. And then the Trump regime would whisk his illegal immigrant ass off to some Salvadoran supermax death camp. Anyway, let's get even a bit more radical here. Picture, if you will, a world without billionaires. No, really, take a second and think about that. What if instead of hoarding obscene amounts of wealth, the ultra-rich were legally required to redistribute that excess to fund things like universal health care, education, and housing. Now think about it. If we capped personal wealth at, I don't know, say $100 million, which is still a ridiculous amount of money, all that excess could go towards programs that actually lift people up instead of outfitting and maintaining some guy's fourth yacht. And what if companies that reached a certain profit threshold, let's say, what if they were required to transition to employee ownership? Instead of lining the pockets of a handful of shareholders and C-suite executives, the workers who actually do the work would share in the profits. It's not a new idea. Worker-owned cooperatives already exist, and they thrive in places like the Spanish town of Mondragon. The Mondragon Corporation is a federation of over 100 worker cooperatives, meaning employees are also members and own a piece of the company. These are democratically run businesses, and they've been thriving since they were founded in 1956. The Mondragon Corporation operates in a bunch of different business sectors, things like finance, industry, retail, even education. But they're not alone. There are also about 1,000 worker-owned cooperatives across the U.S. Not only do these models empower workers, but they also reduce income inequality, and they keep wealth circulating within the community instead of being funneled up to the top 1%. The reason these worker cooperatives aren't more common isn't because they don't work. In fact, they tend to work far better than traditional corporations because they take a longer strategic view and they do a better job at representing all stakeholders. Now, the reason these aren't more common is that, well, number one, we don't talk about them enough or spend much time teaching about them in business schools. And number two, the system is designed to benefit traditional corporations, which makes it difficult to even start a worker-owned cooperative. Think about it. Why would venture capitalists invest money in a business that would then be owned and operated by the employees? Why would a bank offer financing when there's no clear set of deep pockets behind the venture? Just a bunch of hardworking people who are going to do everything in their power to make it successful. The holders of the capital and the financiers, they won't support any of this because it's a form of capitalism that distributes wealth more fairly from the beginning, and it prevents extreme hoarding of wealth. Do you think a worker-owned cooperative would approve an executive compensation package that's hundreds of times more than what the average worker in that cooperative makes? No fucking way. Okay. Let's go in a different direction for a moment. Let's look at the Nordic countries very briefly. Yeah, I know conservatives love to scream, "Oh, they're socialists," while the other side loves to point out that, well, they're not really socialist. And the progressives are right. They're not pure socialist countries. They're just smart because they've socialized the right things. And they try to leverage wealth to benefit everyone. Yeah, they tax the wealthy at higher rates, which the U.S. used to do. The top tax rate was over 90% in 1945 in the United States. But the Nordic countries, well, they also invest heavily in social services, and they actually protect workers' rights. And surprise, surprise, they rank as some of the happiest, healthiest, and most educated countries in the world, year after year after year. Maybe they're onto something. But here's the kicker. This vision that I've been presenting, it isn't just humanistic. It's biblical. So any Christians out there Whether you're a values-based Christian or a dogmatic Christian, take a look at Acts of the Apostles, chapter 4, verse 32, which says, "The community of believers was of one heart and mind, and no one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they had everything in common." That's right. Early Christians weren't hoarding wealth. They were sharing it. They weren't building personal empires. They were building community. Sharing wealth is arguably the main factor that helped create Christianity in the first place. So why are we worshiping billionaires instead of the people who actually lift others up? Why are we idolizing those who hoard wealth instead of those who share it from the outset? Maybe it's time to take a hard look at our priorities and start building a society that honors generosity, fairness, and shared responsibility, not just the accumulation of obscene amounts of money. Okay, let me try to bottom line this for you. Wealth hoarding is neither Christian nor humane. In fact, it's a societal cancer that perpetuates inequality and suffering, and it's absolutely incompatible with the values that most religions, especially Christianity, claim to uphold. Jesus didn't say, "Blessed are the billionaires, for they shall buy private islands." No, he said, "Sell what you own and give the money to the poor." It's not just a suggestion. It's a command. Now, here's the thing. Conservatives love to throw out a smokescreen whenever you suggest something like billionaires shouldn't exist. Even if you address all their bogus reasons why the existence of billionaires, people hoarding obscene amounts of wealth, is justified, they'll say, "Okay, but how exactly are you going to make it work?" And that is a disingenuous question. It's intended to derail the conversation and bog us down in arguing over technicalities. Don't fall for it. The real issue right now isn't the logistics. It's the principle. The goal right now isn't to outline every step of how we get there from here. The goal right now is to get people talking about why billionaires are fundamentally harmful and why we shouldn't allow them to exist in the first place. Because once we get enough people on board with that, the logistics, we'll figure those out. Now, let's be honest. There are a hell of a lot more of us than there are of them. So here's the challenge. Let's stop celebrating billionaires as some sort of self-made geniuses and start celebrating the people who actually work to lift others up. Let's make it normal to talk about how billionaires are a problem, not a success story. Let's start planting those seeds and having those conversations. Because a society that allows billionaires to exist is a society that allows suffering to exist. And is that the kind of world we really want to build? All right. Thanks for joining me for this bonus episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll also keep you updated on the weekly live streams of mythologizing the Bible. Also, if you subscribe for free over at thecodaproject.com, you'll start receiving my weekly resource called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief, once-a-week guide on a single core value. Think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each of those age groups. Each weekly issue centers on a short reflection about the week's value, followed by discussion questions that are tailored for different age groups, from kids to college students to adults. And then a simple take action step, like a small challenge or exercise you can do to put that value into practice. Especially for families, it's designed to be an easy way to ensure that at least once a week, you're making time to talk about morality, ethics, and core values. So if you're interested, go subscribe for free at thecodaproject.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth.